Hello there, and welcome to this, our fourth series of compilations of Take 5 with Tony YouTube videos. We've done one on genetic engineering and GMO foods, another on what I call reality economics, and a third on the fallacy of constant economic growth. Well, this one, which is actually a six-part series, some of them are a bit shorter, this six-part series is about money, wealth, and investment. Hope you enjoy it. Hi there, and welcome to this segment of Take 5 with Tony. Now, if you've been staying with me the last few segments, you know that the idea of trickle-down prosperity is part of our story. But as I've thought about and studied the economy more over the years, I've come to believe that the really 6 core myths drive the way we think about the economy and the policies that we pursue. So today, I want to talk about one of those myths. First, though, I want to acknowledge that a myth is not entirely wrong. There are truths embedded in any myth, right? The problem with myths are twofold. First, they tend to be no more than half true. And secondly, because they're a myth, we don't think about them, we don't reflect on them, we don't challenge the assumptions underlying them. We just kind of take them for granted. That's the problem. So the first myth of the 6 I want to talk about is this: money equals wealth. And the more we have of it, the better off and the happier we are. Now again, as I said, there's truth to every myth, and there's certainly truth in this myth. I mean, I've lived very close to the financial edge at different parts of my life, and I know that not having enough money to even meet your basic needs is a terrible thing, very stressful. So we're in no way suggesting that money is bad or that we want to glamorize poverty. But there are some core problems with this myth. First of all, money does not equal wealth. Money is a means to acquiring wealth, but wealth, or capital some people would call it, is the kind of thing that we have that allows us to meet our needs, that allows us to create value, to open up new doors and build new opportunities. Land is wealth. Buildings are wealth. Equipment is wealth. New innovations are a form of wealth. But money is not wealth. Money is a means to the end of wealth. And here's the problem. In our modern economy, we have an increasing reliance on what the economists call excess financialization. What that means is too much of the economy is built around and based on Wall Street, the big banks, and what's called the financial services sector. That means that not only are we putting a lot of resources into this fake faux wealth of money, but we're neglecting real wealth, land, and restoring the land that needs to be functioning. Our infrastructure, the American Society of Civil Engineers say that we have trillions of dollars in needs to repair our bridges, our roads, our tunnels, our rail lines. So when we focus too much on money as wealth, we neglect real wealth that can actually make people's lives better. So that's one of the big problems. The other is this. It turns out that up to a point, money does help us secure the kind of life that we need to feel happy and content. But beyond that point, money does not tend to make us happy. In the United States, pollsters have been tracking for over 6 decades what people feel about their happiness, how content they are. And here's an interesting thing. Contentment and happiness in the United States peaked around 1956 or 57. And ever since then, almost 60 years, it's been steadily going down. We're less and less happier, not just during difficult times like now, but even during economic boom times. And other signs of unhappiness, divorce, drug abuse, familial problems, they have tended to increase. In fact, one study looked at children of affluent families in the suburbs, and they compared them with lower income kids in a neighboring urban area. You know what they found? Those affluent kids, higher rates of alcoholism, higher rates of drug abuse, more anxiety, and more depression than the poorer kids. So we know that money doesn't equal happiness. Now, this is all very important to understanding our entire approach to building a strong society and economy, because if our prosperity myth is wrong, if we're too focused on money, both personally and as a society, and if that measurement of success really doesn't build happiness and security and stability, then most of our other economic ideas and policies are probably going to be off base too. We'll be looking at the other 5 myths over time, but I want to start with this to say that there's other kinds of economies emerging, like the bottom-up economy, that seem to offer a much better chance of securing real happiness and real prosperity than money. So we've learned that money itself is not actually wealth, and that money and even wealth don't necessarily buy us happiness. But as we'll see in the next episode, that doesn't keep folks who got a lot of it from trying to get more. You get what you pay for. We've probably all used that expression more than once. The idea, whether you're buying a product in a store or paying for somebody's services, that if you pay a little more, you get a little better return, a little more quality. And there's probably a lot of truth to that, but today we're going to talk about it in terms of CEO pay and high pay for top executives. May not be quite so true. Here in Southwest Virginia, there's a company called Alpha Resources. Alpha was one of the largest coal and energy companies in the country, and a couple of years ago they bought the infamous Massey Coal. In so doing, took on a huge amount of debt and liability. Of course, in the last couple of years, also the market for coal has declined quite rapidly, and between those two things, Alpha found itself closing mines, laying off thousands of miners, and ultimately, just last year, declaring bankruptcy. Now, in their bankruptcy filing, they stated that they needed to stop paying for the health benefits and the life insurance for nearly 4,500 retired miners. They put forward to the bankruptcy judge that this was essential, that it would save them about $3 million a year, cutting off the life insurance payments and health benefits for miners in retirement who had worked 25, 30, 40 years in the mines. At the same time that they made this request, they also put forward a proposal for executive compensation, for bonuses for the top 15 or so executives, bonuses that could be as high as $14.5 million. Now, in putting forward this request for bonus pay, they made the argument that this was needed in order to motivate these senior management executives to work hard in a difficult environment and to add value to the company. Cutting off health benefits for retired miners, paying almost $15 million in bonuses to a tiny group of senior executives. Now, if that works, if that truly motivates them to rebuild the company, maybe you could make an argument that in the long run, it would be worth it. Well, 3 researchers, one from Cambridge, one from University of Utah, and one from Purdue, they looked at this question of the relationship between CEO compensation and how well companies perform. Big data set. They looked at nearly 20 years of information from 1993 until 2013, and about 1,500 companies across many different economic sectors. And here's what they found. That the top 10% of executives, those receiving compensation in the top 10%, their companies actually had 8% lower returns than comparable companies with lesser paid executives. And the top 5%, the very best paid executives, well, their companies, they had 15% lower returns than comparable companies with lower paid executives. It turns out that you don't always get what you pay for. Now, there's a lot of moral issues that I think we could all ask ourselves here as well. Is it right to provide huge compensation and big bonus packages to executives who at the same time make decisions to close plants, to shutter factory doors, to send jobs overseas and lay off thousands of people, or to end life insurance and health benefits for 4,500 miners who've worked their whole lives underground? A lot of people would say that's just not right. But even if it were right morally, it isn't working. Those super high compensation packages that now put many CEOs at 300 to 400 times the salary of their rank and file workers is not giving us better, stronger, more profitable companies. Quite the opposite. It's actually hurting their performance. It's long past time to rein in these exorbitant salaries and bonus packages and start returning more of the value to the workers. So we saw how you don't always get what you pay for in terms of some of the executive pay at the big multinational corporations, and that investment in supersized CEO pay and bonuses doesn't necessarily return the yields that we'd expect. Well, in the next segment, we'll look at what about this question of investment and where does our money go on Wall Street? Hello, and welcome to this segment of Take 5 with Tony, where we'll be talking about wealth, investment, and Wall Street. Last time we looked at CEO pay and top executive bonuses, and we saw how oftentimes companies give out bonuses, big bonuses, to senior executives, even as they're laying off thousands of workers or sending factories and jobs overseas, or in some cases, even taking promised health and retirement benefits for their workers and breaking those promises. We saw too how the relationship between CEO pay at the top and corporate performance is oftentimes going in the different direction, that the companies with the highest paid CEOs, on average, had considerably poorer performance. So when it comes to the top pay of executives and CEOs, we don't always get what we pay for. But today we're going to look at that question of getting what we pay for, not just on CEO salaries, but Wall Street and the stock market more broadly. First, I want to pause and just bring up a basic concept, investment. We all know what investment is. It's critical to our understanding of how we build wealth, and also it's certainly fundamental to our ideas of what is Wall Street and the stock market. Now, most of us have been schooled in investment since we were really pretty young, and we've heard that, you have to put in a little today to get a return tomorrow, and that if you neglect to invest, well, things deteriorate over time. But if you do invest, if farmers invest in their buildings and their soil, well, down the road their farms are healthier and more productive. And if we invest in our education, a college degree or training as a plumber or a mason, down the road we can usually secure a better livelihood. And for many of us, investing in a home is not only a way of securing a comfortable, safe place, but a way of building equity and wealth down the road. So that idea of investment, of putting in some extra today to get returns later on, that's pretty basic. But does it work that way on Wall Street? The money that we give to Wall Street, the shares that we buy, the stocks we buy, or typically that are bought on our behalf in our 401ks or pensions, what exactly does that money go to? Is it invested in plant expansion, in greater productivity? Does it go towards improved efficiency or reduced energy or environmental impact? Does it go to technologies that improve the quality of the product and perhaps the health and the impacts on the communities nearby? Well, it turns out very, very little of that money actually goes to those things. Marjorie Kelly is one of my favorite writers and thinkers, and in her book called The Divine Right of Capital, she looked at this question of where does money go that goes into Wall Street. And in one part of the book, she focused on 1 year, 1999, and she looked at the total range of Wall Street investments and transactions in that year. And she found that, get this, less than 1% of all the money going into Wall Street in that year, less than 1%, actually went to investments in productive activities like new plants, new infrastructure, new technologies. More than 99% went simply into speculation, trading stocks, taking money to buy money to make more money. It's extraordinary. So while most of us might have an idea that investment means putting in a little bit today to secure benefits down the road, that's not the way it works on Wall Street. Not at all. So this probably, as we understand this, it should help us understand why we have so many big booms and bubbles followed by catastrophic bursts. Because the money we invest, and it's often our retirement funds, often is not being invested by Wall Street in productive activities, but instead in speculations that do nobody but a very few any good.
Whew. So, if you care about long-term prosperity and real wealth, well, Wall Street's pretty much a black hole. But what's the alternative? In our fourth segment, we'll consider just that, including local investment alternatives.
We're going to pick up on our conversation last time on investment. You might recall that while most of us think of investment as putting some resources in today in order to secure prosperity or a good return in the future, Wall Street has a very different definition of investment. They look upon it simply as using money to make money, not as productive long-term gain. Well, you might have a little money in a savings account, or perhaps you're starting to build for your retirement. You think, well, if not Wall Street, where do I put my money? If Wall Street is a dead end, what other choices do I have? Well, here's the exciting part. Pioneering people like Michael Schumann and Elizabeth Yu and others have begun to open the door to a new way of investing in your own local economy. Also, a federal law passed in 2012, the so-called Jobs Act, has changed some of the regulations that now makes it a little more possible for ordinary folks like you and I to put our money directly into businesses. It's an emerging field of local investment, of local wealth building that we can only begin to talk about today. And I want to use two examples to illustrate the point. One is something called slow money. Now, you've probably heard of slow food, that wonderful alternative to fast food started by Carlo Petrini. Building on that same idea, a fellow named Woody Tash wrote a book that has led to the creation of a national network of slow money investment pools. They're all over. They're in California, they're in Oregon, they're in Massachusetts, they're in North Carolina. And what this is groups of local people, some with significant resources, some with very modest resources, who come together and pool their funds and then invest them in local businesses, mostly sustainable food and farming type businesses. Now, this slow money is modeled on the notion that if we want our world to be a better place, more democratic, more just, and more sustainable, our money has to also support those very same kinds of enterprises. We can't, on the one hand, seek a better world over here, and on the other hand, have our money going to businesses that undermine our values. That's the idea behind slow money, and it's taking hold. Some estimates over $45 million has been invested in little bits and pieces all over the country. Secondly is another very interesting idea called LION, Local Investment Opportunity Networks. Now, these are just groups of people who come together, again, with different levels of resources, but with a commitment to supporting and investing in local businesses. Lion clubs, as they're called, don't actually pool their money, and they don't, as a group, make decisions. They don't review loan applications. But what they do is they create sort of a meet and greet, a matchmaker type thing, where people with some money to invest meet local business people running restaurants, running creative businesses, running roofing companies. And then, as they get to know these businesses, they decide on their own who they would like to put their money into and structure their own agreements, almost always at much more reasonable rates than these same folks would have to pay on the open market. Lion clubs, local investment opportunity networks, slow money. Just two examples of alternatives to investing that are not only probably safer than Wall Street in the long run, but much more a reflection of the kinds of values that many of us hold.
So is there a way we can invest in our local economy just through our daily shopping habits? Well, our guest speaker on this next segment, Alice Maggio of the Schumacher Center, she's going to tell us about local currencies.
So what is a local currency?
A local currency is a way of keeping your money local and a way of keeping your money circulating within the local economy. So it's a currency that can only be used in our own local economy. So Berkshires are a physical paper currency, cash, that celebrates our local heroes on the front and our landscape and our local artwork. And it's something you can spend with our 400 participating businesses.
Now, local currency is not the first thing you do if you want to try to build a bottom-up economy. And in a lot of respects, there's got to be some preliminary work, some plowing the ground that happens before. And a lot of that has to do with building the business base and the culture to buy local, to focus attention on shifting your spending to local independent businesses. That, in many respects, precedes a local currency.
All sorts of different businesses accept Berkshires, everything from an excavator to a dentist, and farmers and food processors and even lawyers.
Now, once you have a broad base of local businesses, diverse businesses with many different choices from food to services to ordinary goods that you need for everyday living, then you may be ready to implement a local currency, as they've done in the Berkshires, where you have both a base of businesses that give consumers lots of choices, and you have the possibility of businesses working together to create even more of a buy local, independent business momentum. That's what's happening in many places through organizations like Bali.
Well, so you can go to the bank and actually buy Berkshires using federal dollars. You change your federal dollars for Berkshires at a rate of 95 cents per Berkshire, and then you can spend it at local stores that accept it at a rate of 1 to 1. So if something costs $10, you can spend 10 Berkshires. And then that money, because of that exchange rate, if you were to take it back to the bank, you'd only get 95 cents on the Berkshire. So it's an incentive to keep it going with other businesses that take the local currency. Eventually, current local currency can actually serve as a tool for investing in other local businesses. You can make a loan in Berkshires to a local business that you want to support, that the community wants to support.
A lot of folks ask, does this hurt local banks? Is it a competition with them? Actually, what they found in the Berkshires and elsewhere is that this is a way for local banks to distinguish themselves. Because I'll tell you, you can be doggone certain that Bank of America and Wells Fargo is not going to accept a local currency because they've got nothing to do with the local currency. They don't invest much in local communities. But local banks invest in local businesses and local homeowners, and so a local currency is a way that those banks can distinguish themselves among their customers and continue to reinvest in their communities.
And they're a very visible symbol of where you're spending your money. They're an educational tool. I think just since 2006, the amount of awareness of buying local and why you want to buy local and who are the businesses that are local has just skyrocketed.
There's no doubt that a local currency is a great way to promote and expand buy local campaigns, a way to focus more and more consumers' attention on the difference between an independent local business that contributes to your community and Amazon or a big box that sends most of its money out there. But here's the catch. For a local currency to work, you need a broad enough, rich enough, diverse enough base of businesses that both consumers and the businesses themselves have plenty of places to spend their money. That's when you can really get local currency working.
Thanks so much for sticking with us. In our final segment, we're going to look back a little bit at what we've already discussed and then look forward and consider how can we begin to reduce the centrality of money to our lives and to our economy. Thanks.
Money. Money isn't everything. Money doesn't buy happiness. We've all said those things, and probably most of us believe it, but doggone it, we don't act like that. This is the final in our 5-part series on money, wealth, investment, and alternatives. Now, as a society, we are pretty much obsessed with money. First, you have the reality that the financial sector of our economy has grown. Banking, finances, insurance, that part of the economy has grown threefold in comparison to the total GDP since the 1960s. It's 3 times bigger proportion of our total economy now than it was in the 1960s. So money, trading money, moving money around, investing money, it's a huge part of our economy. And then there's the second point about the GDP. We've talked a lot about the gross domestic product, but you'll recall that the GDP measures basically money, the flows of money, the money that we dish out to buy stuff, whether it's a local good or a product made in China coming back across the ocean, or a Wall Street split-second transaction. All of those monetary transactions add to the gross domestic product. So here's the deal with that. We put such a high value on the GDP as our measurement of economic well-being, but really so much of it is simply us doling out the cash. Now that not only reflects the fact that there's a lot of bad stuff that gets counted as good in the GDP, and a lot of good stuff that doesn't ever get measured in the GDP, like taking care of your kids or volunteering in the neighborhood. But even more so, that focus on money, transactions, as the way we measure our economy makes it much more likely that we'll have economic booms, because we're not measuring real wealth, real value, real assets. We're measuring money flows. And so we can have greatly inflated bubbles and big bursts, as we talked about before. So as a society, as the way we've structured our economy, increasingly money is at the center, and that's not good for us. Now, there are some alternatives. What if money was not the centerpiece of the economy or the center of our life? So I'd like to suggest two things as means or steps to move away from money as the center of our being, as an economy, as a society, and as individuals. First of all, while we're making this transition, there's no question that we need to fight for livable wages. This is because so long as such a large part of the population is working full-time or nearly full-time and making such low wages, then money, of course, is their primary preoccupation. They must fight for more money. They must work more hours. We must work more hours. And so until we can elevate the wages of people who do the work that we need, whether it's house care, whether it's healthcare employees living with people in our homes, whether it's fast food workers, whatever it is, until we can elevate the wages of ordinary working folks, then money is a necessary obsession. So number one, fight for fair wages. But secondly, in a broader sense, in a longer term sense, we need to work towards greater self-reliance. That is to say, more ability to take care of more of our needs at home or close to home. That's a family endeavor, that's a neighborhood endeavor, that's a community endeavor. Moving away from a dependence on this and the corporations and the banks that make this available. That self-reliance is not only a practical step in an increasingly populated world, but it's also something that lots of evidence and lots of stories leads me to believe that it's much more likely to lead to happy, healthy, contented people. So before I sign off this time, I want to remind you, if you watch Take 5 with Tony, please subscribe. We've got a growing number of people of all sorts who are watching Take 5 with Tony, and we'd love to have you as a regular subscriber. Thanks so much. See you next time.